Welcome into another edition of Central Indiana Today here on 98.9 WYRZ. I'm Rob Kendall, the host of the show. Thanks for joining us on the program today. We're going to talk about area politics with our good friend. He's a writer, he's a commentator, recently joining the comedy circuit, our good friend Greg Lenz. Greg, how are you?
Doing well, bud. How are you?
I'm doing great. So you guys had a big event this week. You are part of the We Are Libertarians Mafia.
Yeah, apparently, yes. Chris Spangle, who you so graciously had on for a two-part episode.
We love Chris.
Yeah. You love Chris as long as it's not about Trump. When it's about Trump, you feel the way about Chris as you do, I'm sure, most liberals.
Well, here's my thing about the libertarian movement. I like the libertarians. I think they're interesting. I think they're oftentimes good comedic fodder, but I also think they have some.
Well, I appreciate that.
Some good points. Now you are interesting though because you're a libertarian that's not actually a libertarian. You're like a hybrid. You like the Republicans too.
Well, so I think you can be a libertarian and be a Republican. I don't see that there's any disconnect with that. I mean, realistically, even Ronald Reagan back in the 70s would say the heart of conservatism was libertarianism to Chris Wallace's dad.
Yeah.
Now, it's just they've lost their way. I mean, and you've experienced it as someone working in politics before, but we're in a new era where the Republican Party post-Trump is going to be ripe for redefinition.
Yeah. It's going to be donkeys walking one way, elephants walking another, and there's sort of the reason we have so many libertarians on this year. I think it's going to be a great year for libertarians to get their message out. I don't think they're going to win a lot of elections, but I think it'll be a good opportunity for them to, unless you guys nominate McAfee. Now, McAfee's very compelling.
I hear you've endorsed him formally. Is that correct?
Here's the thing. I think McAfee, just like Trump, is the candidate America deserves.
Oh my God. That actually is probably true. The only thing is I love it that when they asked him if he was a fugitive in the first presidential debate on John Stossel, he didn't exactly say no. He just said it was a wrongful accusation.
Well, and for those who don't know, John McAfee, the founder of McAfee antivirus software, very eccentric guy for his whole life.
Very.
Moved to Belize.
Fled, I guess you could say.
I'm trying to be very appropriate here because we are on FCC governed airwaves, and I want to be appropriate, as appropriate as possible. McAfee moves to Belize, then is accused of murdering his neighbor.
Yep.
Then goes on the lam.
Yep.
Disappears, goes on, had the police are chasing him, actually has journalists chasing him, and then turns himself in, and then the police finally come out and say he didn't do it. So basically, he fled the police for no reason and had fun doing it.
And whenever a billionaire is able to buy off a third world country's government so he doesn't get charged, I believe him every time.
Well, here's the deal. I think McAfee is, because I think the politics, I think we are run by the McAfees of the world. Just absolute lunatics who are totally in it for themselves and are just destroying this country. So let's put the face with the name. I think the McAfee is the face with the name.
Now, are you telling me that you consider Donald Trump to be that?
No. I think Donald Trump will bust up the cartel and expose that we have these lunatics of the world who are totally... I mean, Harry Reid is no different than John McAfee.
No.
He just hides it.
Yeah, he's just, cares about poor people.
He's very... But anyway, so Greg writes a lot for We Are Libertarians. They do the We Are Libertarians podcast. And now Greg has joined the comedy circuit.
Yeah.
As the We Are Libertarians have been asked once a month to head to Morty's Comedy Joint and do a live performance.
We did.
We did the other night.
Yeah, last night. And you actually came out in support, so I appreciate that.
Yes, we love the We Are Libertarians. And you were actually wearing... You're on the stage. It's like a comedy act, except it's the live taping of the show. It's you, Spangle, and then you had Rupert.
Yeah, Rupert Bunham, who ran as the Libertarian governor for candidate in 2012.
And you had your Donald Trump hat on because you're a big Trump fan.
And I knew that Chris had been having a rough day, so I thought I'd try to trigger him as much as possible to get him kind of punchy for the show.
Now, you are probably most famous. A lot of people know you for being the meme guy. You create memes.
I create memes. I learned how to meme as a way to promote our show because what I found on social media platforms is text is no longer a viable medium. Long-form content isn't really shared or liked very much enough to get further exposure on social media. And so I started doing a meme with every article.
And now, for those who don't know, explain what a meme is.
So a meme is an internet sensation of a picture that communicates, I guess, an absurdity or something ironic. And then it's got all white impact font text. So that a meme is really just something that's I guess, an offshoot of like mimetic replication in like a cell, rapid
It's designed to
replication.
trigger a response.
Right.
It's
Trigger response.
outlandish. It's so. For example, let's say one you did with me. I became famous for calling a candidate Lion and then his name, a local candidate. So what you did was you took my face and imposed it on Ted Cruz's body because Ted Cruz became known as Lion Ted during the presidential race and called it Lion Rob.
I actually did that in response to you attacking my personal life and humiliating me on social media, which I greatly appreciate.
But here's the thing about you guys, and I think the We Are Libertarians have caught on to something, which is this new generation of politics, which is everything is kind of funny when you break it right down, and politics is the most funny because and I'm not talking about people on your town council or county council, but the people that serve you for the most part in the federal government and many people in the state, they deserve to be memed. They are outlandish. They are doing ridiculous stuff.
The political system is like the Peter principle in business, where like the dumbest guy keeps moving up the chart. But it's because he's said yes and done enough horrible things that it's his time to get tapped on the shoulder.
So what we're seeing are guys like me, and I get called the Hendricks County Donald Trump, where I have no filter, I have no boundaries. I say and do just about anything, but it works because people say we're so sick of the crap that goes on that just like with Donald Trump obviously on a much bigger scale, but I think people say with Rob, I don't like him, but darn it, he's right.
Right, like they don't like the antics.
Right.
That's what's changing in our culture is people are having to adjust to an era where traditional antics don't work. So we have, mock absurdities, and almost satire, and then like you going out and trying to rustle every feather of the Republican Party in the state of Indiana,
lighting a candidate's mailer on fire, or allowing a dog to destroy it. But here's the thing. Again, it comes back to the whole thing about McAfee. These candidates are doing so. A good example is Pete Miller sent a mailer out, a taxpayer-funded mailer. It's different than a campaign mailer. All the elected officials do this. They send out
small government conservatives.
Yes, they send out a taxpayer-funded mailer to tell you what a great job they're doing with your money. And in the mailer, and again, this has to be a. I'm told this is approved by party leadership, basically. They send out things to tell you how great they're doing. And one of the things they mentioned was road funding this year. Yeah. And in the mailer, they put no state tax increases. And I said that is just blatant deception because the tax increase in the road funding bill is going to come from the local governments, which they've now given local governments. They didn't fund local roads really in this bill.
That would be too hard.
They're not going to do it themselves. So what they do is, and they did this with 911 centers several years ago, where they mandated consolidation of 911 centers. They mandate local governments do things, they don't fund them, they dissolve their hands of the issue and say, hey, no tax increases when they're passing it off to somebody else. So if you're going to be deceitful, and I've picked on Pete enough, I'm not going to pick on Pete anymore. I'm sure.
Do you use his little moniker that you coined with him?
I try to keep it somewhat fair on this show. I think everybody knows how I feel about Pete. But station manager said you can't say that on the air.
Oh, did he?
You cannot say that phrase.
Rob Kendall can be controlled. Is that the truth?
I love community radio. It's so great. But that's the sort of thing where you say that is ridiculous. You are deceiving and elected officials across the state are deceiving their constituency because the taxes are coming, but they're coming from people who have to enact them basically to get Green Street plowed.
Yeah, it's utter hypocrisy because you see the candidates that, like for instance, like a Todd Rokita, and these individuals are Republicans, same party, and they scream or cry murder over unfunded mandates from the federal government. But then when you get into the local level, Republicans forget all of these talking points about the federal overreach and just pass off everything to the local government, which makes everybody look like a bad guy at that level.
Again, our guest is Greg Lenz. He's part of the We Are Libertarians club, and now joining the.
Are we a club?
You are the club. You're an exclusive club of whoever will come over to Greg's apartment to record the show. But Greg and I were Chris's apartment. Chris and I were talking last week. You guys are sort of a success story for people who want to get into this podcast medium because you guys are Chris. Years ago, started this thing with very few listeners. You record it at Chris's apartment. He's very candid about that. And now you guys have thousands of people who each week listen to what you guys have to say.
We do. And I mean, we get donations from people all over. I remember 2 years in, we actually had a listener in Iraq, and that just blew our mind that someone, and it was a military service
Did he send
member.
you Iraqi currency or did he donate with U.S.?
He sent us Iraqi dinar, and luckily I couldn't even buy a coupon with it. But that's okay.
Just hang on to that as the state of the U.S. economy. Soon it'll be very, very valuable. Okay, but Greg keeps and we feel like I feel like the libertarians, especially you, are very fair to the overall thing, because, like, I have a Republican guy come on, they're going to homer it for Pence or Todd Young. If I have a Democrat on, they're going to homer it for Greg or Barron Hill. You guys give just a pretty fair analysis of you're not under the delusion that, hey, Rex Bell's going to be the next governor of the state of Indiana.
Right. Like, we would certainly hope so. And Rex, Rex is running for governor, won the nomination, and is a great guy. But we also know that there's a history of us not cracking that 10% number, so it's unlikely we're going to pull it off.
And for those who don't know why you mentioned the 10% number, the 10% number is big because if you get that in the presidential race, you get automatic ballot access in the Secretary of State's race.
Yeah, Secretary of State's race.
If you get 10% in the Secretary of State's race, you get automatic primary access. You get access to the primaries. And on a national level, if you get 10% in the presidential race, you get matching funds, which is millions and millions of dollars.
And it's actually 5%, but it would be so little until, it'd be such little money.
Right.
And then it basically escalates as a ratio up from there.
So, but you are very fair. You're very fair. You're so fair.
I am known for my fairness.
You're so fair. I got in big trouble yesterday because I wrote an article. I write for Indiana Forefront. It's what I do. I told people when I left the town council, because there are certain people who just don't like me. They did a lot of happy dances and said, thank God he's gone. And I said, you're going to regret that because it's going to be far worse with me being able to say whatever I want.
You're locked in here with me now.
Yeah, it's before even though I was the total anti-establishment elected official, I had to protect certain things that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that involved working with some of my coworkers, and occasionally if you offend them, they're not going to vote for what you want to do, so you got to keep it down.
You can't just meme people into voting the way you want.
That's right.
Unfortunately.
And then I made the mistake, and I say a mistake, I had a good time, but I lost a lot of time going to work for Stutzman. Once again, you can't say exactly what you want to say.
Are there things you would want to say when you were, because I felt like you were pretty outspoken with Marlon.
I don't want to say this. Marlon's a great guy. He was cool. When they hired me, they said, we get who you are, say what you want. But there are just certain things where, especially during the Trump-Cruz thing, where there were so many people that were voting for Cruz who hated Trump, and it's like, I can't light this person on fire because this person I know is going to vote for Marlon.
Yeah, I need him to show up with his 8 neighbors on Election Day while I'm interviewing Donald Trump.
But now we can, and it was ironic because I interviewed Trump the day before the election, and that was sort of like the Field of Dreams thing where it's like, okay, on to the next phase of life, which is the steroid version of Rob being able to say and do what he wants. So one of the things I tell people is now, I observe, I comment.
Yeah.
I observe, I comment.
You're a commentator and an analyst.
I am not Chris was so enraged about the Trump, me wearing the Trump hat to the Trump rally. And I said, I'm not a member of the media as a journalist. Yeah. I'm a commentator.
And it's like, I guess to me, we know Fox News is basically a propaganda wing for the, for the Republican Party. And it's not that there's some fair-minded standard anymore for independent journalism. The reality is it's for-profit journalism. They're selling to a market. They're going to reach that market with the best commentators who tell the message how those viewers want to hear it.
I am a fanboy for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I don't hide it. I don't deny it. If you listen to me talk about Donald Trump, you are not getting unbiased, fair analysis. You are getting a fan.
But you're not going to get that anywhere.
No, you're not. So anyway, part of what I do now is I am a Republican, but I am not married to the Republican Party. I'm not employed by the Republican Party, and so when I see things the Republican
That's
Party
pretty clear now.
I'll never be invited back.
Yeah.
After I wrote this the other day, some people were like, do you think they're going to take away your right to moderate the forum tomorrow night?
I hope that you are forcibly removed tonight while I am sitting in the government center watching you get ready to moderate.
Because somebody goes the other day, they go, what if they kick you out of the party? I said, I don't think they can kick you out of the party. I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into it, but I wrote a piece about Governor Pence and his lack of organization.
Yeah.
He did not staff his office that he has on the square in downtown Danville at a time. Thousands of people were flocking there, and I thought it is a microcosm of, and people mention this to me. I mean, comment when people come up and say things.
Yeah.
If people don't say things, I kind of point and laugh and maybe move on. But people were commenting on this at the event. And I said, that is a microcosm of some of the criticism of Pence, which is he opens his office, he shows up, he's got 20 staffers there. They're literally placarding the inside of the thing so that it looks perfect. He leaves, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. And That's not how you win an election.
You can't have tent cities. I mean, you really can't. And that's when you told me that, I was stunned because I actually do like, so a lot of Mike's Governor Pence's staffers I really like and are really great guys, and they're smarter than that. So that gives me, I guess, a little uneasiness that he has a sense of entitlement about his reelection in a year he really shouldn't.
Because you're saying, look, what are the built-in, and I wrote this as like a warning to them, like, here's a giant firecracker in the air for you people to pay attention to. And of course, a bunch of people got offended and sent me mean messages, and that's okay. Get in
You're
line.
a meanie, Rob.
Get in line. But part of you says, okay, one of your advantages is that you have money and infrastructure, and as the sitting governor, access to events and people that John Gregg doesn't have. And when you have this event, I think Pence is in trouble. I know you think he's doing better than I do, but I think he's in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, what the problem is, I guess I can make the argument that since that county is so Republican, there's absolutely no chance he loses Hendricks County, Indiana whatsoever. It might be something where he's strategically placing resources in I guess you could say a swing district or swing county. And so I guess if that's the argument you're going to make, I'll go along with that. But the reality is, to the outside observer, it looks like entitlement.
It
and that's a problem.
That was the thing. People are walking by, and the ones because a lot of people they come to Danville. They're coming from whether it's Seymour or wherever for this festival. They're reading the names on the placards. Joe Smith, attorney at law, and you see Governor Mike Pence, and a lot of people were
well, you don't see him.
Yeah,
you see the sign.
That was the problem, and so you're just sitting there talking to yourself, going, okay, look, how does a sitting governor who has all these resources, who was so into this office that he brings a busload of people to the office. But that was the other side. Okay, now we're so sensitive that some guy, and as nobody touts themselves more than me, but some guy writes a column for Forefront, which is associated with in a business journal, and that's a good publication. We love those guys. But I'm not make or breaking the campaign. Nobody's reading this.
No, and it should never be a culture within a party where you don't want to hear it from internally before you hear it externally, because you're not doing a disservice to the candidate. You're getting them battle hardened, and they better have a good response. I fought this in the Libertarian Party for the governor's race.
Yep.
And I was like, wouldn't you rather hear it from me?
Yep.
And you get your affairs in order internally before you're exposed to people that can't stand you.
And again, our guest is Greg Lenz. He's with the We Are Libertarians media empire.
That might be a bit strong.
I love that Chris referred to you as veteran journalist or experienced. I think he got it wrong a little bit, but he tried to get it right. My joke with Greg is they take pictures of their show, and Greg was interviewing Rex Bell, who is the Libertarian nominee for governor, and Rex was answering a question, and Greg had the microphone like right up to his mouth, was really looking intently as though he was going to ask some sort of very neutral, important question afterwards. So I labeled Greg, veteran journalist Greg Lenz.
Much appreciated, because nothing says journalist like memes. But anyway, what I was actually telling Rex, I wasn't asking him anything. I was saying, no more private roads. We cannot lead with private roads. I know it's big, and Jeremiah Morrill, his campaign manager, tells me this all the time. You don't understand. Roads are important where we are.
Right.
I'm like, yes, but the average voter doesn't care.
Right. Well, and so that is the topic I wanted to get to next. Is you had Rupert with you guys at Morty's yesterday, and I thought Rupert touched on some interesting things because he was the Libertarian nominee for governor in 2012. He got about 4% of the vote, a little bit more, which is a lot for Libertarians, especially since he was up against Pence and Gregg, who are known quantities. But he talked a little bit about some of his philosophies, which are anti-libertarian philosophies. And I was sitting there watching you guys thinking, it's interesting that Rupert gets that Sean Hannity's view of the world is not correct, and it does not play out for everyone.
Right.
Not everyone lives in suburbia. Yeah. Not everyone has apple pie on the windowsill and an American flag in the front yard. And, there are folks whose parents are strippers or drug dealers or pimps, and they don't live in this libertarian, philosophical, everybody fend for themselves world. And I thought that's
because they're able to.
Yeah,
in Carmel, libertarianism's easy to sell because they're like, good, no more speeding tickets. That's a tougher sell on the east side of Indianapolis where you're worried about security every day.
Well, and that becomes the thing, is not just for the Libertarian Party, but as a nation, as people are beginning to look more towards libertarians. We love Trump. We're Trump fan guys, but a lot of people are not. People hate crooked Hillary Clinton.
Yes. And the rumor is incontinent. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard such rumors, but there was a picture that's been leaked, and it was not edited or altered. And so, and that is a shame because that's terrible. But incontinent Hillary may be the coin phrase
And
Donald
Donald
goes
Trump
with.
has no boundaries.
Nope. I mean, as long as I am a firm believer. He only attacks if attacked.
Yep.
If
And
she attacks him, incontinent Hillary may be on the headline of the New York Times.
it is, but you say, how do the Libertarians deliver a message that can speak to suburban soccer moms? And when we had Rex and Jim in here during their debate, which was a wonderful debate.
You did very well.
We did so great.
Critically acclaimed moderator Rob Kendall again.
We love Abdul, but I'm just going to say I think the Libertarians got more out of the Rob Kendall debate than the WIBC debate.
Yeah.
I think there were more pressing questions.
I'm not the person to ask because Abdul called me out at the convention debate.
Right. That's true. You're very biased.
Yeah, and so Abdul said, "You guys need to knock off the infighting," and I just stood there and waved at him in the back, and then he trundled off while I tried to ask him about if he was specifically targeting me, and then I had to buy him a drink so he'd warm up. Typical Abdul.
Well, we love Abdul, and Abdul has been very good to me over the years. He is my, we joke, he is my big brother.
Yeah, you and Chris are both from the Abdul tree of hosting.
Yes, we are. We love Abdul, but I'm going to say we got a lot out of the Libertarian debate hosted by Rob, me.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I felt both of them missed the mark on was when they were talking about the drug issue.
Yep.
And they both talked about legalizing drugs. And I said, that's well and good, but if your goal is to bring a bigger tent into the Libertarian Party, Soccer Mom in Avon does not want to hear that Johnny is going to be subjected to pot on, as he's walking home from school, whether it's legal or not.
Right.
And it's just you lose those people at that very moment.
You do, and the right way to attack that is fiscal conservatism. You have to say, listen, your taxes are going to go down, and maybe glance over how it's going to happen by less enforcement on drug issues.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, okay, that sounds Republican.
Right.
I know a Republican. This sounds okay.
Another point that I thought that Rupert made that was interesting, and I am not in any way lobbying for the Federal Health Exchange, Obamacare, anything to do with government-run health care, but he made the point that Trump made, and the Republican Party never has an answer for this, and the Democrat answer is so over the top, which is you can't let people die in the street.
Right.
You cannot let people die in the street. So what's the answer? The answer is the government has to have some role in providing for people who cannot provide for themselves. Now, I don't think Obamacare is by any means the right approach, a government mandate, but I thought it was interesting that Rupert was willing to touch on, again, getting out of that Sean Hannity America, which is you have to provide for people who cannot physically provide for themselves.
Right. And, the way the right usually attacks this, and then definitely a lot of pure libertarians, is that we're just going to pull the rug out from under you and it's survival of the fittest. Good luck selling that at a county fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can't be done. You can't sell a negative. The way to approach it is, listen, as a society, we agree upon certain things. We also agree that it's probably worse for all of us if there's rapid change. People, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Right. And so the way to do it is an incremental approach. And insurance is different, right? Healthcare economics is different. It's something where without a mandate, you get only 6 patients and the costs only rise, and then it's so expensive for healthy people, they end up falling out. And so, I mean, if we're going to be real libertarians and we're going to be even fiscal conservatives, we have to say, all right, we need an incremental approach. We're going to provide for the worst among us, but we're going to really make sure we vet those who actually need it and who are capable of working. Because as a society, we've decided we're going to take care of the poor, the sick, the hungry, the chronically unemployed, or the mentally handicapped.
We're also going to take care of radio broadcasters, which I think is a great idea.
Are they?
I think they should.
What about podcasters?
I think they should really take care of us. I was talking with Jeff Vibbert, our friend Jeff Vibbert,
Yes.
Yesterday, and we were joking about, is this a real job? Do Jeff and I have real jobs as broadcasters? And
yeah, I think so.
I think we're providing a great community service.
No, you definitely are. I mean, this is a different industry. It's not 80-20 like most, where 20% of the people make 80% of the money. It's where 1% make 99%.
Yeah,
and you just hope to get included.
We're not getting wealthy off this, that's for sure. But
not yet.
Okay, so do you have time to stay with us?
Love to.
For a Monday show?
Yeah,
we'll
love
go ahead.
to.
We'll go ahead and do that. We do let the cat out of the bag sometimes. I think everybody knows we do tape these shows in advance to accommodate the schedules of our award-winning guests who have done so much. I mean, that's how you get guys like Trump. You can't say you got to be here at 7:00.
No, you just say, I don't care what my campaign obligations are. I'll be wherever you want, whenever you want.
We'll close with this because it's a great way to end the week. Because I don't think our audience would rather hear about anything again rather than my interview with Donald Trump. I felt it was great.
I loved it because you didn't you weren't timid about it was an endorsement. You basically had an audio endorsement for 12 minutes of Donald Trump thanking him for saving us and being willing to do what no one else will do and save America.
Yeah, and he was so interesting, and I've told you this before. I think the best part was after the interview when he continued to say how wonderful I was. I mean, it's literally like being on Celebrity Apprentice, and Donald Trump is telling you how you've just won some challenge for charity, and
you won the local Indianapolis Apprentice. You're the next media star because you told Donald how good he was, and he thinks you're the next Cronkite.
But literally, he sits down and you start talking, and I said the great thing about Trump, and it tells me what a guy is. They never asked me what I was going to ask him. He had no idea who I was or what I was going to ask him until he walked in there. And the first things out of my mouth are how great he is, and his eyes like light up. And it was like, oh, praise the Lord! Somebody's not going to try to ask me about some gotcha question.
Is John McCain really not a war hero?
Okay, so Greg's going to stick around. We will be back Monday. Don't forget, if you missed any part of our conversation today, check out the podcast anytime you want by logging onto our website at wyrz.org. Greg is heading to Orlando this weekend, so when we come back, we're going to talk about that. He's got a big political thing he's supposed to be doing. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget, if you missed any part of the interview, you can check out the podcast at wyrz.org. Until next time, I'm Rob Kendall saying have yourself a great evening.
You've been listening to Central Indiana Today with your host, Rob Kendall.
This is Donald James of Impact Youth Mentoring. Impact Youth is a not-for-profit mentoring organization providing mentoring services to the children of Hendricks County. We pair mentors ages 16 and older with youth in Hendricks County. Over the past 5 years, we have been able to impact over 120 children through our mentoring and tutoring programs. Information about becoming a mentor or finding a mentor for a child can be found at impactyouthmentoring.org or via email at impactyouth1010@gmail.com.
Welcome into another edition of Central Indiana Today on 98.9 WYRZ. I'm Rob Kendall, the host of the show. Thanks for joining us on the program today. Back to speak with us, our friend, commentator, now joining the comedy circuit, Greg Lenz of We Are Libertarians. Greg, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks. It was a lovely weekend here in the studio. I appreciate the magic of editing. It's incredible.
Now, we as we said last week, we do not hide the fact that we tape these interviews to work around the schedule of our very exclusive schedules of our guests because we get the best guests.
Do you?
I mean, you think about
I feel like I brought this show down and ruined your career.
No, we gave that to Spangle.
Okay, good.
But we like the Libertarians because you are, you're a Republican, enough Republican, but you give a very fair, we feel our Libertarian friends give a fair analysis of what's going on. Now, I'm very excited because a bunch of the Libertarian candidates, somehow I've gotten labeled as the Libertarian media guy.
You're friendly to Libertarians, and so all of a sudden you're everybody's favorite Republican.
Like my inbox, I get like 9 requests a day from Libertarian candidates to come on the show. Yeah. It's like I'm running for auditor in a certain county. It's like, I don't think you quite fit what we're trying to do.
You should leverage this.
I'm really excited because we're going to have a bunch of Libertarian candidates coming on as we get closer to election. And I don't think they'll be as fair and nice as you are because you're very open about flaws in the Libertarian Party as all the parties.
Yeah, it's a vessel to me. You know, I identify on philosophy, not vessel. I'm not going to be a marching boy for any party.
Yeah. So we have Greg back today because one of the big things going on in the state of Indiana is there's a governor's race. Last week I got in big trouble for writing some critical things about the governor, Mike Pence. It's amazing. I was once on the Pence website listed as his most loyal supporter, and now I'm in trouble because I wrote one slightly critical thing about the day-to-day operations of his campaign.
It wasn't even critical.
I didn't think it was bad at all.
It was like independent reporting of facts.
I told my girlfriend, I said, I could have done way worse.
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You could have coined a catchphrase about him like you did to other Republicans.
Yeah, so, but you're here because they're to talk with us a little bit more about this governor's race. There was a poll that came out, and it was sort of the first kind of accurate, public, trusted, this looks in line with what's going on in the country poll. Bill Osterly, who, full disclosure, does not like Mike Pence, even though he is a Republican.
I thought he was going to primary challenge him, to be honest.
Yeah. But he's a business guy. well known. So
yeah.
so I feel like you could trust him because he is a Republican. He doesn't like Pence. May actually vote for Rex Bell when it's all said and done. Who knows?
He may very well. But yeah, Osterley founded this. He actually founded Bellwether. Or is it Bellwether Strategies?
It's Bellwether.
Just Bellwether.
We call it the Bell. No, I just call it the Bellwether poll.
The Bellwether poll.
Greg,
Gotcha.
all right. He says I don't do research before I come on. I just say, Lenz, what do you want to talk about? Let's talk about the poll. Okay, great.
I have opinions, and my audience wants to hear them.
Well, and I'm very wonderful with the show because, as many people know, I record, I do all the editing, I do it all myself. I'm more focused on making sure your levels are good right now. You could be talking, I have no idea what you're saying.
You're Donald Trump endorsed.
But yes, that's right. I'm terrific. That's actually what my Twitter bio says now. Donald Trump once called me terrific. So Osterley, who is a respected businessman, a lot of people thought he was very into the was very upset with the gay marriage, gay rights, RFRA phase of the Pence
Just one
governorship.
thing after another,
Yeah.
really.
But so we feel like he's pretty good guy because he's a Republican but doesn't like Pence. So it's probably a pretty accurate polling.
Yeah.
So Osterley has this poll. He shows it basically 40-36 Pence and Gregg, a lot of undecideds. I think that's pretty accurate. And you've sort of broken down the actual poll and are going to give us some interesting tidbits on the poll.
Yeah, and so I actually have a different perspective on this than virtually everyone I talk to because no one can get past like the gay hate, the RFRA,
Right.
Making Indiana look bad on a national stage. And at the end of the day, I think, shockingly, Donald Trump is going to guarantee Mike Pence's reelection.
You've said that many times. Why do you think that?
I believe that because when you look at Pence's numbers in that poll, his biggest supporters are men, senior citizens, and people lacking a college degree. Now, Donald Trump has risen above those numbers, but those were his core early
Right.
supporters. And those are the people that are registering to vote for the first time and showing up in droves, even though they tend to lean more Democratic.
Do you worry about the fact, though, that a lot of those people are union people who may be, because here's what we found in the primary. A lot of the people would go vote for Trump and then did not vote the rest of the ballot. Do you worry that those people tend to be more union-oriented, maybe a Democrat who might vote Republican in the presidential top of the ticket because of Trump's stance on carrier and things like that, but then will vote the rest of the ticket as a Democrat?
In a traditional race, I would, but John Gregg doesn't present a vision.
You don't like Gregg.
No, it's not that I don't like Gregg. It's that, like, Mike Pence I respect because he always sticks to his principles.
You could staff the campaign office in Danville. That could have been your job.
It'd be all memes. We'd run the first ever victory center entirely based on handing out memes. And I don't think that's going to coincide with what he wants to do.
Do you think the governor has ever seen a meme?
I know he has because I actually know the one he did see and was not real happy about it.
Greg did a couple memes of the governor, and I don't think they went over well. It was one of those, you guys, so to recap what we talked about Friday, one of the things Greg does very well is he and his co-host of the We Are Libertarians Empire, Chris Spangle, laugh at politics
You have
because
to.
they are jokers. 90% of the people you encounter in politics are fake, they're phony, they're jokers, they're playing you as people. And I say this as someone who experienced this during my time in local government. I can't imagine what it's like on the broader scale. But so you guys create these memes, which are visual cartoons, basically.
Right, like it's a short form version of like an SNL skit
Yeah.
mocking and satire about like George W. Bush.
Right.
And so you can apply it to anybody because there are these fundamental truths that we all know the absurdities there.
Yeah.
And that's why I find the Trump outrage hypocritical.
Right.
You expect your politicians to tell the truth and then get mad when the reality TV star doesn't? What are
Right.
you talking about?
Well, and part of the cool thing, you guys have created an almost cult-like following with your memes because it's an honor to be memed.
I actually someone came up to me after I gave the keynote address at the Henry Wayne Rush in Delaware County county convention.
You
for
did
the
great.
LP.
The applause was thunderous.
I'm shocked because I usually get the opposite reaction from libertarians.
Were you nervous?
No, I was passionate about it because the messaging in the party makes me so mad.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Like it's purists, it's voluntary taxation, it's all these terrible things. And so I was hell-bound that I was going to deliver it as authoritatively and passionately as possible, so it really hit home.
Doesn't it make I love when I'm up speaking and I see people that are brutally uncomfortable with what I'm telling them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because it's not something you're telling them that you say, oh my gosh, this is so outlandish and so over the top, but you say, you need to hear this.
You do. And they hate that because people don't want vegetables shoved down their throat. They want to hear,
Yep.
they want to hear fluff and how wonderful they are.
We were talking, I gave a speech to the Young Republicans, the first one of the year. I was the outgoing vice president of the Hendricks County Young Republicans, and I talked about how you get people involved in the party. And, one of the things I said is Republicans do a terrible job of recruiting young people to the Republican Party.
Look at the ones they bring in. I don't want those people. Do you? I mean, it's like Alex P. Keaton, like nobody wants to hang out with the kid carrying a briefcase in 7th grade. Like that isn't effective outreach.
So you did there are very few things you do that I go, oh man. And you did a meme of the governor and I thought, man, that's
brutal.
That's brutal. And you got into a Twitter fight with a bunch of anonymous accounts over this meme.
Yeah.
And they were very pro-Pence, offended. So that's the one he saw?
No, this was the other one. It was the one he saw, and I hope I'm allowed to say this, but it was him laughing at a Lincoln Day, a breakfast, and he had a cup of coffee, and he had his hand over the cup of coffee, and the other guy was laughing, and so I put on there, please don't get your gay in my coffee. He saw that and didn't love it.
So he saw it, actually.
Yeah.
Though. It's pretty honoring to know that the governor saw your work.
Yeah, I think that explains why you said he gave me the evil eye at the Hendricks County Lincoln Day
for
dinner.
Those who don't know, because I am like a light version of the Libertarian guys. I still play in a lot of the official political sides. They don't like me when I go to the things, but
they're liking you less and less each blog post.
So we invited Greg to the actual Hendricks County Republican Party Lincoln Day dinner this year, mainly because I knew so many people would know him. I wanted to see how uncomfortable I could make certain people, and we were laughing because the governor gave you a look. I don't know if it was meant to be an evil eye, and Todd Young body checked you.
Well, for a Marine, it was pretty weak, and I didn't want to respond hoorah and crush him right there, so I let it pass and let him go up there and give his stump speech and shake his hand 4 times.
My favorite part was the guy next to you, who you have often told on Twitter to go to a very bad place.
Yes.
Finally realized who he was sitting next to, and I thought they were gonna have to resuscitate him.
Triggered. He was fully triggered, and there's nothing worse than seeing a libertarian come to a Republican and being sat next to a rhino, because I'm just going to stand there, and he knows I'm just looking at him, and he knows that all his principles are gone, and he's just sitting there with his popularity.
It was so great. So let's get back to the poll. You think this bodes well for Pence. My concern is 40% for Pence, 36% for Greg. I think that's where it is. If you haven't made up your mind you're voting for Mike Pence as a sitting governor, how do you sway people at this point that, hey, I'm the better choice? I mean, wouldn't you know I'm going to vote for Pence?
Yeah, but the thing is, I think people overestimate how many undecideds really are out there. I think for the most part, a lot of people that are going to vote for Pence just don't want to say it at dinner parties.
Really?
I really do. I think that I think people rank what their priorities are, and there's no arguing. Mike Pence has done a good job on the economy. When you compare our economy to the people around us, it's really not.
Spangle will hate you for saying that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's true. We have the lowest unemployment by comparison of all the old industrial Midwest. He's got a tagline in his new stump speech where he says, "We know what the road looks like, and it's to Illinois." Yeah. And that's a good line.
Paid for by local governments, right? Because the state's not paying for
exactly.
it.
Exactly. Yeah. Man, I'll tell you, state government is the best place to be. You can complain about the federal mandates, and you can just pass down those local.
I told somebody because a couple of years ago or last year, it was going to be Rob Kendall running for state senate. It was the match everybody wanted, Rob Kendall against Pete Miller. It was going to be a year-long bloodbath. Everybody was very excited. And ultimately, I decided not to do it because I said the only thing I would get out of it is being able to go in there and be such a belligerent and expose what's going on, but ultimately you don't accomplish anything because you're still the guy that sits in the back and can't get a bill through and cannot, you spend your whole time fighting to expose the corruption, but you can't enact change because of the way the system works. And unless you got a bunch of team players.
But I think the environment dictates a lot of that, because you would be popular in this political climate, but being the belligerent outsider and also being a young, fresh face.
But then I couldn't have done this.
That's true.
I couldn't have hung out with you, Greg. Well, I would
have made you. That's actually very true.
I would have made you my chief of staff.
Oh no, you wouldn't. You'd have got no. The GOP actually would have excommunicated you had you done that.
But it is interesting because the argument Pence is making, and he made this when we had Abdul on a couple of weeks ago. By the way, are you and Abdul better now? You said you bought him a drink, and
no, we're not better because he still called me out for. I mean, infighting is infighting.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Well, and so those who don't know, our good friend Abdul, my mentor, my big brother, Greg, one of my great friends, had a little rift at the Libertarian convention. Abdul called Greg out for his
Toxic infighting.
toxic infighting, which, by the way, as a Republican watching that, I think it's hilarious. And literally, one of the last things before I go to bed every night that I do is check the Greg, Lenz, Chris Spangle, We Are Libertarians feed to make sure I didn't miss anything before I close my eyes, because it is hilarious stuff. And you were quite passionate about Rex Bell being elected the Libertarian nominee for governor. And
I am. I believe in Rex because I know I can trust Rex. Being a leader is about character. And so at the highest level and at the end of the day, character tells you exactly what someone will do when it's not popular.
Yeah.
And with Rex, I know what that is. And to tell you the truth, I know what Mike Pence is going to do 99% of the time because I believe he is a good person and a high moral character.
So so Abdul was talking about Pence went to the downtown GOP club, and the argument he made to those people, those are very liberal, socially liberal for the most part, Republican, club Republicans.
Yeah,
they're not inviting us.
They're the Jeb Bush Republicans.
Yeah, they're not inviting us to events.
No,
they probably have dolls that they're pushing pins in with our faces on it.
That's where Todd practiced his body checks. What I heard.
But the argument Pence made to these people was he said, you don't want to not vote, and I'm paraphrasing, you don't want to not vote for me because you don't want to undo the last 12 years. And I thought the 12-year thing was interesting and intentional because he said, if you vote Greg in, he's going to undo the Daniel stuff, which you guys really like.
Yeah.
And isn't that sort of what Pence is running on, is 12 years, not 4?
Yeah, I mean, shockingly, a guy that was a nationally prominent player with universal brand ID ran against John Gregg in 2012, who has still to this day very little universal brand ID.
Mike had a great Hendricks County coordinator in 2012. That's why he won.
Was that you?
That was me. And the office would have been staffed at Mayberry in the Midwest
That's
if I were
right.
still a county coordinator.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, but I mean, so the fact that it was as close as it was is really interesting because Mike Pence, I mean, being a Republican in Indiana is like being a Kennedy in Massachusetts. You're guaranteed to win as long as you don't do anything just horribly offensive like Richard Murdoch. And Mike still wasn't able to really pull it out in the way he should have. And so I think this time around, though, it's going to be completely different. John Gregg isn't a leader. John Gregg just is running on a campaign platform of, look what Mike did wrong, I will do it less wrong. And that's not going to play. And he's also now a flip-flopper.
What does Mike Pence... Okay, so how does Mike Pence... People just don't like Mike Pence. There's a lot of people who just don't like Mike Pence.
You being one of them.
Well, it's not that I don't like him. It's I struggle with... Because I come from a local government point of view, which is there are things that our state has to do, and one of those is we have to pave roads, we have to provide water and sewer services, we have to have sidewalks for people to walk on, we have to do these things. And I think you have a bunch of people in the legislature, which ultimately Mike Pence, well, not the head of the legislature, he is the governor, he is the head of the Republican Party, he sets the policy tone.
Supposed to.
Yeah, it's supposed to. And that's another criticism of Pence, is that David Long and Brian Bosma set the policy tone.
They did.
Not Mike Pence. But we ignore what the requirements of what people have to do. And this road funding bill was a total microcosm of that, where we have roads and bridges. And I'm not the one that says people are going to die on our bridges like the Democrats are trying to do. But the bottom line is, in communities like Brownsburg and Avon and Plainfield and Danville, we have infrastructure that is crumbling and falling apart. And it is, in many levels, the job of the state to address these issues. They don't address it because they're so worried about going, well, somebody might run an ad that says I raised a fee or a tax or a whatever. So they don't address it. They kick the job to the local government, and then they send out mailers like Pete Miller did and countless other state politicians did and said, look at what we did. All this money that was yours anyway, we gave it back to you, and we didn't raise your taxes. And I struggle with that. And I told Chris this last week. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do in the governor's race because I can't vote for John Gregg. And by the way, I think Gregg's going to be on the show soon. But
is he?
Well, that's a rumor.
Can I be here and moderate?
Here's what people know about Rob. I am a total partisan, but I am very fair on the air. I will never sandbag somebody. I will let them have their say and let them go.
Yep.
And I think Gregg knows that, knows it's a good audience to reach.
But now you're Donald Trump endorsed.
Well, I am a fanboy in the presidential race. I will not vote for Hillary Clinton.
Well, I don't think Democrats will. They'd rather vote for Bernie, to be honest.
So that's the news flash. But I struggle with that because I think that you're being disingenuous with your most basic duty to your constituency. And I struggle whether I'm going to vote for Pence or Rex Bell. And I think the next several months is gonna tell that, because I struggle when you mandate people do things, which is what the federal government does to the states. You don't fund it, they cry foul on that, then they do it down to us and go, well, look at what we did.
Yeah, it's tough to stomach voting for a hypocrite.
It is, and we flushed one out in the Senate side, but
You did. Congratulations.
I'm not going to flush the governor out. I'm not that powerful. What do you think Pence has to do, and let's switch gears on that too. What does Greg have to do in the next couple months? Because you start setting a tone over the June, July, August of how this campaign is gonna unfold.
Right, and so John Gregg just recently released his first TV ad, and
we were not in the ad.
We didn't make it.
We would have been great for the ad.
I don't know he would agree, or his campaign team would, but maybe. But it basically says, it talks about the Hoosier economy and then claims it isn't doing well. And then you look at all the economic data that comes down the pike and you're saying, well, that's not entirely true. Right. Granted, wages aren't as high, but we're in a new world. We're in a global world where you don't compete with Illinois, you compete with Bangladesh.
Right, absolutely. And Carrier's a great example of that.
Exactly.
One of the things that I worry about with our state government, and I said this because I was the director of the Indiana Board of Pharmacy, and that's under the Professional Licensing Agency. And I fear that our state government is a giant house of cards, to where we're not cutting the government role. We're cutting the employees to enact the role of government.
Right.
And when the governor comes out and says, well, I'm mandating a 2% cut in state hiring or state employees, that's well and good, but you're not cutting a 2% role in state government.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is giving people less service for their money, and then you're claiming that's a victory. If you cut the 2% role of government with the 2% reduction in employees, that's great. The other thing that happens is, like in PLA, that agency brought in roughly $15 million a year from doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, people that are paying to have their profession licensed, thinking that money goes to that. It doesn't. It all goes into the general fund. They take about 4.5 of it, send it back to the PLA, and now there's just $10.5 million floating out there for pet projects. That's not leadership.
Well, that's how you buy votes, and you form coalitions, if you will, in the Senate and House. But, I guess I see it exactly like you do. But I would guess your favorite president was Reagan?
It was. Van Buren just didn't.
He didn't do it for you.
He just didn't do it for me. I've always been a big fan of the early presidents, because I thought talk about
the founding fathers.
Yeah, making something out of nothing.
Yeah.
The
entrepreneur presidents, if you will.
I think it's always impossible to. I'm not a Ronald Reagan fanboy that believes that the world was a big giant happy place when he was president.
You don't think that he remade the shining city on a hill?
I'm very realistic about it, but I would say modern presidents, Reagan, by far the best.
Yeah, and I would agree, mainly because I liked his positivity, his willingness to speak over the press corps and not get bogged down in little, shouting matches. And then I loved the one thing, though, that he did struggle with is, so he enacted his tax reform plan, and he had the line, when I want to cut, or when you want to stop the size of government, I just assume cut its allowance.
Right.
Basically. And so that's the same mindset as Mike Pence. It's a universal, sounds great, plays well, polls well, but then at the same time, those government agencies still have their responsibilities.
And it's tough for me, because I always joke with people saying nobody cares what I have to say. And people go, a lot of people really care what you have to say. And so I struggle with this, because this is information that I think people need. And it's like when I wrote that article about the Pence campaign and their lack of presence at the Mayberry in the Midwest Festival.
Complete lack.
Yeah, complete lack. I'm not doing it to be mean.
No.
I'm doing it that people need to know that the state is not doing a service to local governments. They're harming you as a taxpayer. Your taxes are going to go up, but it's not going to come from the Indiana Senate or the Indiana House. It's going to come from your local governments, because the state of Indiana is still using the majority of the gas tax for pet projects and not to fund roads.
Right, and they're going to keep doing that, and it makes them politically vulnerable, because then all of a sudden a Democrat comes along and says it's time to rebuild our state.
Yep, and I struggle with that, because like I said, I got multiple messages, not that I care what anybody says to me, but I got multiple messages from important Republicans about that article. And I said, look, man, people have a right to know what's going on in their state. And you guys are building a giant house of cards that will eventually crumble over on itself if you don't actually fund the government you mandate.
And I, as a libertarian, should love that, because then, it just perpetuates this myth of government incompetence and the inability to do anything well.
Right.
The problem is that when government starts doing poorly, the calls for bigger government, more spending, higher taxes is also growing at the same time. And people will always reach a crisis point, like with Pete Miller, the individual you're talking about. they're kicking the can down the road, and it's a game of Russian roulette, hoping to God the bridge doesn't collapse.
Right.
And if it does, it's a Democrat in office.
That's right.
You know?
And that's not meant to be that they want anything bad to happen to
No.
people, but you're not addressing the issue, which is, and in a strange way you say that, but they are guilty of malfeasance with public money because most of the gas tax doesn't go to roads.
No.
It goes to pet projects.
Yeah.
The same way as most of the money to PLA didn't go to license people or have staff to make sure you're effectively licensed or in a timely manner.
And you don't feel safer because your hairstylist has a license, you know?
And that's what I really, really struggle with is what do guys like me do, because now all of a sudden you're persona non grata because you write publicly, hey, I'm really concerned about the way the state is managing its money and spending its money. Well, now you're a bad guy in the Republican Party. So where does a guy like me go? I mean, nobody's going to look at Rob Kendall and say he didn't do everything during his time in office to behold what should be Republican principles: low taxes, infrastructure, reforming government.
But I thought you were the greatest tax cutter in Hendricks County history.
The most prolific one in the history of Hendricks County.
You're the Reagan of Hendricks County?
Nobody cut taxes more than me. By the way, people hate our arrogance. You know that? They just literally hate our arrogance.
Oh, yours?
No, but it's not arrogance if you back it up.
That's true. That's verifiable.
It is. I've always said that. I've said if you can look to something and say, I did this and at great time and personal costs and everything else, you have the right to look at people and say, we did this.
Yeah.
We did this as a collective. And that's where I think people struggle is the people like me, where do we go? Because we like the side that says, hey, we have kept taxes down. We do have a good economy in the state of Indiana, but you are being very deceptive with the future of the state of Indiana because you're not addressing the problems.
Right. And so I guess what I hear you saying is that basically where is the room for leadership that's protected from political backlash?
Right.
And that's always been the case, though. The founding fathers, arguably, they were going to pay their lives. They were basically going to be tried with treason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had they not succeeded.
Yes.
And so leadership.
I feel like that's how we're going to end up.
Well, yeah, that's what libertarianism's fate is. Actually, we're all going to be in FEMA camp talking to each other, playing pinochle. But hopefully, we don't get there while we're alive. But that's the truth about any time. Anytime you're in a tenuous situation, a real leader says, "Listen, this is what we have to do. This is how we can do it. I have the plan. I can sit here and sell you all you want to, I can be what a politician does and tell you what you want to hear, or I can fix this." And so there's always a tipping point where it gets to the stage like with crumbling infrastructure, people will rally around this silent majority that will be, that's what's happening with Trump.
Yeah.
A Republican talking about the poor while also talking about being not so much, or, fair trade, and also cutting taxes. He doesn't fit the normal paradigm.
And it's the thing I love. Well, one of the things I love most about Donald Trump is he was the first guy to come out and say, you know what? George Bush let us down in a lot of areas.
Yeah, he created ISIS. His exact words.
His foreign policy was not successful. It was awful. You and I, Greg, literally could have been sitting in the White House and had a better foreign policy than George Bush. And it's okay to say George Bush was not a great president.
No, I mean, if we were, proponents of radical Islam, we'd think he was great. But unfortunately, you and I aren't.
I remember during those debates when he said this. Now, he went some stuff and said George Bush let us down on 9/11. I'm not sure that's all accurate, but he said a lot of things, and I said, this is stuff that people think, and nobody's had the guts to say this is going to help him, and he won South Carolina overwhelmingly when he said that.
Yeah, I mean, he called out the Pope and won in an overly evangelical state, and that wouldn't make sense normally. But there's a silent majority in this country that realizes the absurdity that's going on, and they're rallying around leaders, and that's always been the case. So, like for you can't get disillusioned.
Right.
You have to be willing to stand out from the crowd, and eventually that silent majority will find you.
I want to close with this. You, by the time this airs, you will have gone, but you got to go to Orlando.
So I'm actually. Is this a joke?
This is serious. That's what I heard.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually going to Orlando to hang out with the girlfriend.
Oh, I thought you were a convention.
That's what everyone thinks, and I'm actually not going to go. But so I will comment on it. So everyone was assuming I was going to go.
I was totally convinced you were invited to the Libertarian National Convention.
Oh, I was, but I would not be popular there. If you followed the Libertarian debate about the presidency at all, you'll know that there was a recent former governor of Massachusetts who's signed on to Gary Johnson once as his vice president.
Right, and this is very controversial.
Hugely controversial because he's another Republican governor.
Right.
But this guy was the Libertarian poster child back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so someone with legitimate policy chops, very credible, but it looks like a Republican takeover to the purists that have started the party and been around forever. But so what's going on is Gary Johnson should be the nominee. There's horses for courses. This race with Hillary and Trump, high negative people want a third option. A former Republican governor who's socially liberal.
We're not going with McAfee.
I'm not Rob Kendall.
We have a real
I'm not
chance.
a kamikaze politician.
Can you imagine McAfee and Trump on a stage with Hillary Clinton? She may fall over and die.
He might just pull out the corpse from Belize.
I mean, can you imagine? Anyway, go ahead.
No, but there's going to be, the spotlight's going to be on libertarians because people are desperate for a third choice. People are desperate for leadership. Hillary doesn't have a message or a compelling reason people should vote for her. Actually, she's got a negative because young people and the real progressives like Bernie, and she's stealing it from him. Trump isn't your traditional conservative, and he doesn't fit the narrative Republicans like to tell themselves, and he's not beholden to him. So Gary Johnson, former two-time elected Republican governor of New Mexico, is a viable on-paper third option. And I think that is going to be compelling, and that's why for this race, he's the guy. There's a lot of talk, though, that he hasn't done enough courting of the old guard, and so he may not win on the first ballot, and if he doesn't win on the first ballot, he won't win.
Interesting. So that because Peterson, and we'll wrap up with this, Austin Peterson is the sort of the rock star, new young guy.
He actually speaks about liberty the way you should. He isn't an apologetic libertarian or libertarian-leaning Republican. He stands up. He goes, listen, I'm against the state, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm against federal overreach. That's not an unpopular thing to say. It's a totally valid position, and I've been waiting for that forever.
And he's a good-looking fella, and was TV guy. So
high energy. Yeah. He was Judge Napolitano's executive producer and friends with John Stossel.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm really torn because I always try on the main elections to vote for one libertarian.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be I was going to do it in the state senate race. Can't do that now.
No, can't do that now.
So I'm really torn on where I'm going to find my libertarian.
Well, let's see.
I've got a governor that's running for libertarian.
In your district, we have a guy.
We have a state house. I don't think there's a U.S. Senate.
There is.
Oh, there's a U.S. Senate.
Yeah, Lucy Brenton.
There's a U.S. Senate, but I'm not sure there is a state Senate. There is a state Senate. There is, U.S. Congress. So I'll have to figure it out. But I always try to vote for one libertarian. Just
vote for Rex Bell. If you're going to vote for anybody, Rex Bell's the candidate you'll never have to apologize for voting for.
And he's
a great guy.
He's just a heck of a nice guy.
He's incredible. I mean, you shake his hand and you know everything he tells you is true. And he's like Honest Abe. The guy's like the living recreation of Honest Abe.
My favorite Rex Bell, and Rex has been on the show many times. He'll be back many times. And by the way, we should point out, we're going to have all the governor candidates. I assume Pence is going to come back now.
I hope so, because your interview with him was good.
It was great. It was very nice.
And he is a nice man. You just have to separate person from policy.
Yeah, we should point that out. And we'll get into that another time. But my favorite Rex story, and we'll close with this, is at the Libertarian Convention. He's running for the candidate for governor. It's going to be a very close race. I would be very nervous, but he walks up to me. I'm not even a voter. I'm not a Libertarian, delegate or anything. And he walks up to me and I said, Rex, you're in a suit and tie. You look very nice. And he said something to the effect of, the only time I wear a suit and tie is a wedding, a funeral, or when I'm running for governor.
That just sums up who he is. And he's actually going to be at the national convention.
Not with your girlfriend, though.
No, with his wife, Susan Bell, who's an elected libertarian judge in Hagerstown.
That's right, she is.
Yeah, very famous for the the person wanted to pay a speeding ticket or a seatbelt ticket with pennies.
That's right.
And she had to deal with that. That's her notoriety. But he'll be down there. He's going to be speaking to the delegation and fundraising nationally. And Rex is a really compelling candidate. If John Gregg is the flip-flopper you can't stomach and Mike Pence's social conservatism isn't your style of GOP politics, Rex Bell is a credible, incredibly honest, trustworthy man, totally capable of doing the job.
All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks to Greg. If you missed any part of our conversation today, you can log on to the website at wyrz.org and check out the podcast anytime you want. Till next time, I'm Rob Kendall saying have yourself a great evening.
You've been listening to Central Indiana Today with your host, Rob Kendall.
This is Donald James of Impact Youth Mentoring. Impact Youth is a not-for-profit mentoring organization providing mentoring services to the children of Hendricks County. We pair mentors ages 16 and older with youth in Hendricks County. Over the past 5 years, we have been able to impact over 120 children through our mentoring and tutoring programs. Information about becoming a mentor or finding a mentor for a child can be found at impactyouthmentoring.org or via email at impactyouth1010@gmail.com.